Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the third of our new series, Conversation or Coffee Cocktail, with a member of the Washington for Law Society Board. I'm Juliana Canet, the president of the Washington for Law Society, founded in 1952 to promote knowledge and understanding of international law, comparative legal issue, and foreign law. Aisha Gringel, recent graduate from GWU LLM, will interview Antonia Tzinova, partner at Holland & Knight LLP, and former president of Washington for Law Society. Welcome to both. I hope you have your cocktail handy, coffee for me, and sit back, relax. Given the number of participants, we muted all of you, but you still have a chance to ask a question of your interest about the background and other issue on the career of Antonia. You can use the Q&A section. We will send the question as during the interview, and we will get to your question at the end, toward the end. The session will be recorded. So welcome, Aisha. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Juliana. Also welcome from my end. We are very thrilled to have Antonia as our guest today for our third board member interview. And I would say we get started right away. I have a few questions. We also received a few questions from participants. And I would like to know why you chose the legal profession, and maybe you can describe a little your path to becoming a lawyer.
Thank you, Aisha, and thank you, Juliana, for the introduction. And good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking from your time to sit on a Zoom meeting with me. So how did I choose to become a lawyer? I honestly, for the longest time, thought that I'm either going to be an astrophysicist or I'm going to be an archaeologist. These were two of my passions as I was going through middle school and high school. And I believe I was maybe 15 or 16 when the changes in Eastern Europe started. And what we're seeing right now here as protests in this country, I've experienced in my early years as protests in Bulgaria. I'm originally from Bulgaria. And I participated in many protests and strikes as a high school student, and that kind of, eventually as a student, and that kind of changed my mind about the profession that I wanted to get involved in. In Bulgaria, you do not have the separation as we have here, where you go to college first and kind of have 3-4 years to decide what you really want to do with your life. You jump directly into your chosen profession. And so at my last year in high school, I was convinced that I'd like to become a lawyer and get involved in the processes that were going on in our society at the time, and see how I can contribute to building of a civil society, building the institutions that have been put on hold or completely destroyed for over 45 years, literally my parents' lifetime. So that was it really, and I don't believe that I was ever sorry that I chose this instead of my original ideas, although I have to say that I still have a hobby, and maybe after I retire from practice, I may go back to school and see what I can do about history or archaeology or some social sciences. That's how I started it. And then I finished law school. You know, again, you're fairly young when you do that in Bulgaria. In the meantime, I had one green card lottery. And again, you have to understand the context in which I was living, being completely behind the Iron Curtain, and all of a sudden the society is opening and news are flowing in and information is flowing in. I was in a relationship, and my partner had come to the US on a student exchange program. That was back in '94. And he brought back with him like literally a piece of paper, a brochure, a pamphlet on how you can enter the green card lottery. And he was adamant that he wanted to live in the US. And he said I should try. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. So I put in my name, and at the time it was a very unsophisticated process. It was a piece of paper on which you put your name, put it in the regular snail mail, and just wait for a response. And 8 months later, I received the letter that I was one of the lucky 55,000 or 100,000, I don't remember anymore. And I was still halfway through law school in Bulgaria, so it was never really a matter of am I finishing law school in Bulgaria or not. I did come here for a couple of summers on a purely an adventurous trip. Worked any type of job you can find if you're only here for 2 months. That gave me a great insight into the lives of people from different walks of life. I picked up on various accents. My very first time when I arrived at JFK, I wasn't able to understand the flight attendant, the agent at the airport who was trying to issue me a boarding pass for the next leg of my trip. Within a couple of years of summer vacations here, I was able to understand pretty much any accent, and it turned out quite helpful later on in life when you're dealing with various people in your career, and you not only read accents, but you're also reading minds, and you're reading people and where people are coming from. And so after law school in Bulgaria finished, I was faced with a choice. I mean, what happens now? I have this green card and this opportunity, but if I were to come to the US, it meant that you're throwing almost everything away and you're starting from scratch, or just kind of give up on this ability to travel and to explore the world, and stay in Bulgaria and build a legal career. And so I chose to come here for a few months just to give it a try. It was an adventurous trip. I never really imagined I'm going to stay here long term. But then one thing led to another, and here I am today. You know, I do not regret it, although I want to say that if I had stayed back there, I would have probably been happy as a lawyer there as well, because things have changed dramatically since I left. And so that is my decision and story of how I became a lawyer. It took some time after I came to the US because I had to retrain myself and recertify myself. So it took a good 4 years of a nighttime program. I wasn't willing anymore to be a full-time student at this point. I wanted to have at least some income and some flexibility, but it has worked out well. So I've been practicing now for 15 plus years. So it's as they say, the rest is history.
That's a very great story, and a lot of happenings that were just not to expect. So you're a partner at Holland and Knight. We've heard how you decided to become a lawyer. Now you're here in the US. How did you transition from being a fresh graduate from Bulgaria and coming into the career path that you went on and being in the position you are today?
It really happened quite gradually. I wouldn't say that it just was a jump from one to the other. I did not start law school here immediately. It took a couple of years. And so I've already had experienced the American society a little bit in a little bit of a kind of not structured but kind of mitigated way, if you will. I was working at the International Monetary Fund, and even though that's in DC and it's one of the signature institutions of DC, it is not quite an American experience. It's not quite an American life. It's an international organization with different culture, if you will, different world. But so it was gradual transitioning to the US. And then when I joined the law firm, I joined an international group. And so people were very well-traveled, very well-versed in international affairs, international matters. So it was a very open, very kind of welcoming environment. Little by little, I learned the American ways and the American culture. And so it wasn't a shock, it was gradual. But you have to adapt and you have to adjust, and it's different environments, and you have to take that into consideration. And knowing both, or even the three worlds that I'm talking about, it can be very helpful sometimes, because you effectively serve as a translator of culture, translator of language, not literal, but values, legal concepts. I mean, just as one example, I have clients from Bulgaria that had to go through litigation here in the US. And the concept of discovery is completely different in Europe, or at least in Bulgaria, what I've learned, and here in the US. And it's a total shock for them. You know, the type of documentation that a defendant has to provide in discovery. Another shock for a European lawyer is that you can conflate contradicting arguments and theories in your argument before the court, and just, you know, hope that one of it wins the day. In Europe, you have to pick your strongest argument and go with that. And if they're contradictory, you cannot do that. And the reason I'm saying it is I'm not a litigator, so I didn't really know much about the merits or the procedure of what's going on, but I know enough of both systems to be able to explain to the Bulgarian lawyers and to the Bulgarian company how life works in America. And this is very helpful, because otherwise there's like cross-talking, and people on the two teams do not really connect and appreciate what's going on and understand what they're facing and how they can be responsive.
So you have explained how your skill set that you've developed being a Bulgarian lawyer and being an American trained lawyer has benefited your career so far. You work in international trade, which is a very interesting field. But maybe you can talk a little bit further about the skill set that one needs to develop a career in international trade, things you've learned along the way.
I believe that the skills that you would use in any other legal practice are the same that we value a lot. I mean, one thing, this is a very high analytical practice, right? I mean, it's a very high level analysis, legal analysis that we perform. It's not like kind of a copy-paste practice. And so that's what makes it very interesting, because you're learning every day and you're faced with the same regulations and laws in a new context every day. And that's what makes it interesting. I mean, I often say export controls, for example. I'm just going to give you one example. You need to figure out how a specific product is classified for export control purposes in order to be able to give the client advice on what regulatory regime they need to follow and what requirements there are to take it out of the country. Well, before you get there, you need to learn about the product. You need to understand how it functions. And so I told you at the beginning that I wanted to be an astrophysicist, and that helps. I have a particular affinity to learn about technology and how things work, literally, in a mechanical way, right? And so sometimes when I have to research, and oftentimes that's Wikipedia, I just need to understand how a flight actuator works, for example. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's the little flap that opens and closes on the wing of an aircraft. And so this is a controlled piece of thing, but in order for you to understand how to classify it, you need to understand it. And so I had fun learning about it. And as I say in my group, I mean, we get paid to have fun, right? I mean, you're learning constantly about something, and somebody's paying you. And so it requires, you know, you can have any background in order to be able to do that, but you have to really enjoy doing this in order to engage in it. And then the other thing, I mean, international trade is like so broadly defined. I mean, it literally touches on everything that crosses the border, except for people, right? Whether it's knowledge, whether it's hardware, whether it's software that's being downloaded somewhere in Cuba, I don't know, whether it is capital flowing out or in. I mean, it has a relevance to international trade, whether it's setting up a business abroad or having foreign investors in the US. I mean, you name it, it's out there. So you have to be willing to learn new legal concepts and explore new substantive areas. And it's never stable. I mean, if you followed the news in the last 3 years, even on a 30,000 feet level, you know that trade has been in the news all the time, right? I mean, it's the fruit that gives. I mean, we will never go hungry because no matter what convictions are about what's right and what's wrong, we are busy because we need to understand what's the current regulation and the current guidance and the policy. And so it's a very richly intense practice in the sense of it's very varied, but it changes quite a lot, quite fast. And so you like to you have to enjoy like this fast-paced living, if you will. Attention to detail is super important because the regulations are very complex, and a small detail can change the analysis. Good writing and communication skills, but that is true for any practicing lawyer. You're talking to different people. You're not necessarily talking to the general counsel. You may be talking to a compliance officer. They don't have the same level of education, meaning like legal education. So you need, or you're talking to business people. You need to be able to clearly communicate with different types of professionals. And so this is where I was going with this at the beginning. I mean, having tried different things. I mean, I served coffee. I worked in a Blockbuster. I worked in a photo shop. It kind of teaches you how to communicate effectively with all types of people, and it's very helpful. I mean, I teach my associates to lose the legalese very quickly after they join and start focusing on communication. But I think that this is true for any legal profession.
So going back to your variety of jobs you've done in the past, legal and non-legal, you've switched jobs. So I know that in our audience, we often also have professionals that are looking at a new challenge or are considering to switch their profession and seek a new challenge. Besides the things you've already mentioned, being flexible, being able to communicate, being attentive to detail, are there any other skills you think someone has to work on if they want to transition to another profession or transition within their same career from your experience?
Well, you have to be willing to allow yourself to transition, right? I mean, and that means that you may not stay on the same trajectory that you imagined you will be on, coming freshly out of high school or out of law school or whichever phase in your life you're in. I mean, as I told you, I graduated from Bulgarian law school, and then I came here, and I took literally a 7-year detour. And there were times when I was frustrated, exacerbated, desperate, sad. I thought that I would never be able to practice. I mean, I was a perpetual law student at some point. I think I've been in law school for 9 years. I mean, so I have sworn that I'm not going back to school, at least not to law school, because I was tired of constantly being in this learn, but never get to do it mode, right? I was doing other things. I wasn't practicing as a lawyer at the IMF. And now I've been practicing for 15 years, which comes to tell that taking a detour is okay. You're in this for the long run. I mean, your career is not over after 5 or 10 years or 15 years. I mean, I will be working probably for another 15 or 20, I don't know. It depends on so many things. And mostly we live longer. We have higher expectations of ourselves, and it's kind of fun to be involved in something. And so if you're flexible and you allow yourself to take certain risks and even certain adventures. I mean, I didn't do it with the idea, oh, I'm going to the US and I'm going to become this big lawyer, as you described me. I don't know if that's accurate, but let's say. I was just coming here to have fun for 6 months, right? And so the way I found my first job, I'll take a moment here. So when I first came to the US, I told you I worked in a coffee shop and in a blockbuster. And then I met this Bulgarian woman in the blockbuster and just overheard her speaking to another Bulgarian. I hadn't spoken Bulgarian for 2 months. And I approached and I was trying to introduce myself. And the words were just not coming because I have stopped talking, speaking Bulgarian for a while. And I'm talking, this is 90, I think 97, 98, when internet and Skype and telephone communications were just like a luxury, right? I mean, Skype was not invented, but I had to wait for the weekend to be able to call my parents for a few minutes. I mean, that was the reality. And so I was trying to tell my name in Bulgarian and tears start coming, right? And she was very gracious and very kind. So she, invited me to go visit her at her house. We became friends. I came back the following year after I finished law school and just said, hi, how are you doing? And like a week later, her husband, who was a senior advisor at the IMF, said, well, I have this opening. Are you interested? You're overqualified, but it's better than working in a coffee shop, right? Or in a photo shop or whatever. And so that's how I started working at the IMF. It was when I went to interview with them, they asked me, when can you start? And I said, well, I need to give notice to my current employer. And they said, yeah, but you're working in a coffee shop. I'm like, well, how would you feel if I just disappeared one day without letting you know that I'm leaving, right? But when I was sharing this with my colleagues at the IMF, they were like, what do you mean? Everybody wants to get into the IMF. And you were just telling them you have to give notice to a coffee shop, right? And so it was pure happenstance. I didn't plan for this to happen, but I took the opportunity. And then I was not part of the legal team. I was working at their institute at the time. And so that's, I think, capacity development nowadays, or capacity building or something like that. And so one of my functions there was to monitor the mailbox for announcements of the World Bank, of various courses and seminars they had for the staff, for both World Bankers and IMF economists. And one of the seminars that I just happened to check was FDI, Foreign Direct Investment Seminar, and it was a whole day. And so I just took a day off and I signed up and I went and I met with somebody and I talked to one of the presenters and I said, well, give me some work. I'm already part of the system. I'm in law school. Just let me do something for you and I'm happy to do it for free. And he was like, well, I don't know, la, la, la. And then 3 days later he called and he said, well, you wanted work. I need help with an article. Are you willing to help? And so I did. I was doing it as part of, studying. I was doing it as part of a research assistant program at the university during the summer. It was just a few extra hours a day that I was putting in. And then that was the thing on my resume that caught the attention of the people at Holland and I. I mean, I was called like the girl from the World Bank. As derogatory as it may sound to you, but I mean, that was the description that they gave me. They wanted somebody with this type of experience. And they hired me out of a pool of, 500 law students that graduate from GW every year, right? So the reason I took the liberty of going into such detail is to show you that it doesn't necessarily happen in a linear way. I mean, you have these detours, and you just need to be kind of open-minded and a little humble. And just take the opportunity and walk with it, like flow with it, and then things happen.
I think especially in these unprecedented times, a lot of our participants are also recent graduates like myself. We appreciate to hear a success story like yours that gives us hope and that shows that, as you said, it not always has to be linear. Sometimes you will have to take a detour here and there and just accept the coincidences of life that you encounter. So thank you so much for sharing your path with us. I know it's much appreciated.
I mean, the most important point is have fun, be mindful, but be open to whatever comes your way. And don't be afraid to live your life and take detours, because life is not going to be a 20-year span. It's going to go on for quite a while. And that even holds true once you're in the law firm. Let's say you want to have a career in a law firm and you make it the first year associate, and then you want to become a partner. And after, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years, whatever the length is, I mean, these keep changing. You become partner, but that doesn't end your career there. You're going to be into this game for the long run. And so it's okay to kind of take it easy, take a deep breath, figure out what you want to do right now. Is it worth it? What's a priority for you in the moment? Maybe it's family, maybe it's having fun, maybe it's an excellent opportunity to go work for, I don't know, the Court of International Trade in New York, or I don't know, a UN institution or something. And maybe that's not going to get you directly into partnership, but you build resilience, you build experiences, you build flavor, and all this comes together eventually, and it helps in one way or the other. And I consider myself still early on in my career, so I'm expecting good things to happen and interesting things to happen from now on.
So with your profession and your work in trade, you've mentioned that it's very international, which makes the field of international trade very attractive too. But you also mentioned you have a family, and we do not only ask this question to our female participants or female panelists, more to say, but pre-COVID, I can imagine that your job also required a lot of traveling. And you also mentioned that you went to law school when you were a little older, not the typical 19, 20, 21-year-olds that just graduated from college and transitioned to law school right away. Is there any advice or anything that you would want to share with participants that maybe be in a similar position and have to balance having a family or being employed and trying to make it all work?
So I want to reframe the question, if I may. This should not be like a family versus work. Whether you have children or not, we all have lives, right? We are all entitled to our time away from the office. And so it is your job to draw the line early on and kind of educate people around you where the boundary is, right? I mean, just because you don't have child right now, doesn't it mean that you want to enjoy 2 hours with your friends, with your parents, with, I don't know, just you name it, on your own, reading a book? Isn't that as valid as raising a child, right? I mean, and things change. They're never a constant, right? So start early, and that's not something that's going to happen overnight, but learn the art of saying no, right? I mean,
that's something, yeah. Maybe if I may ask about that, saying no, if we can talk about that a little. How would you advise on having that discussion with your boss or with someone who requires a lot of your attention, requires a lot from you, having the opportunity and possibility of saying, I really need some time to myself, because that's something that I know a lot of young professionals struggle with. Getting that conversation started.
The first step for me is you don't need to give a justification, right? I mean, I'm not available. I'm busy right now. Like if you're talking to a client right now and the call is scheduled from 4 to 5, are you not going to show up for this call because somebody else is just pressing, like saying, hey, I need you? So it's the same thing. You do not need to justify it. Don't talk about it because you may irritate somebody just because we're human. Like if you tell me, oh, I need to go to the movies, I'm taking 2 hours, I'm not going to work on your project. I as a person, as a human being, may feel irritated and say, really, I haven't been out of my apartment for a week and you're going to the movies, right? So just be smart about it, but draw the line. Like, what's important is you need to be accountable and responsible. So if you have committed to a project, if you have committed to an assignment, just deliver in a timely fashion. If there is any reason why you cannot meet your deadlines and your commitments, mitigate, right? Communicate early on, try to find a solution. So don't just tell me it's like 5 minutes before the deadline, oh, I'm not going to be able to do it. Like, tell me early on and give me an alternative and say, hey, I need to switch gears here, but I've spoken with this and this, and they're going to cover for me for this, like 3 hours and I'm not available. Or what is the real deadline here? Is there any flexibility? Because this block of time, I'm not available. I can do it later tonight, right? So you have to be creative, but you also have to be firm. You cannot be not responsible. I mean, if you fry me once, I may forgive you. If this happens a second time or a third time, I'll probably stop working with you. And that's true not only with me, but I think across the board. I mean, you only have that many chances to burn the bridge, right? And so when I'm saying take yourself seriously and allow yourself the time that you would allow to your clients, I'm not saying it allows you to, you know, not meet your deadlines or the commitments that you have undertaken, but you just need to plan and be responsive and be firm. I mean, this particular segment of time, I'm not available. I have some other commitment that I've agreed to before you ask me to do this. And don't just leave it at that. You don't need to explain yourself. I have a family, I have a kid. I mean, you know, I'm a fairly new mother, right? My son is 6. I don't use my son as a justification. I don't say, oh, I have a family, I need to go home. Because it's not fair to the others who do not. And because my son should not bear the burden of being born because I want to be a lawyer, right? I chose to have him. So I'm the one responsible of creating the space that I need to be able to function as a mother and as a partner. Does
That's
make
some
sense?
great advice. Yeah, totally. That's some great advice. Thank you. And I definitely hope that a lot of the participants who have been dealing with questions in that regard can get something out of that. Speaking of questions, we encourage you to send some in earlier, and you did.
Have some.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we have some, but you're also welcome to use the Q&A function to post some questions that may have arisen in the course of the interview, because I believe there's a lot of things that you would want to know about Antonia, about her profession in international trade, and maybe about how she deals with current challenges. But we have a few questions.
Yes, we have 5 or 6.
Okay, so I will read one of the questions that we received beforehand. One of the participants asked, as a recent graduate, how you would advise them to deal with the challenges of finding a job in current times and having the opportunity to network, to meet people, if there's anything you would think of that they can do in that regard.
So that is a tough one. I'm not going to pretend that I have the answer for you. I'm just going to give you some points based on experience, right? And this is unprecedented. So we are all going through this, and it's difficult for all. And right now, at least in the private sector, I think there is a virtual freeze on hiring. I mean, if you've already secured an internship last year and this is waiting for you, we just started our summer intern program, summer associate program. It's extremely limited. We only have 4 weeks of those people working with us virtually. But it has to be an exceptional situation right now for us to hire someone, right? That being said, we have adapted pretty quickly to the new environment. we've transitioned literally from today for tomorrow. It took us 1 day, 24 hours. And everybody went remote, and we've been working and we've been managing somehow. And this is with us, but it's going to eventually improve. I mean, I have no doubt about this, that this too shall pass. It may not happen in a month, it may take a year, but it will eventually will move on. I mean, one thing that is kind of similar, but not quite, is the 2007, 8, 9 crisis, when the financial markets just collapsed and the real estate collapsed and the economy collapsed and all that. And there was a freeze, and it was difficult for people who graduated in those 2 years to follow the traditional path into a law firm, for example. But this is where you use your creativity, right? I mean, I know people who chose to go and do an LLM and just not leave a gap on their resume. And we're, as a matter of fact, I think we're considering hiring somebody as a partner now who was a graduate of those times, and she went to do an LLM because I think she couldn't find a job. And she was very successful working on the Hill in the last few years. And so now we're bringing her in as a partner. So I don't have the right answer for you, probably because I never had to deal with this on my own. I mean, right now I have a job, right? So I didn't have to do it, but I've mentored people over the years from GW, students from GW, and so this might be the time to get involved with some sort of a pro bono or civil organization. Like if you do not have a job secured and there is no opportunity to interview for a specific job, I mean, reach out to, I think, civil lawyers or Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, for example. They're very, very active right now on defending protesters. You know, people that were arrested or people that are actually losing their homes because they're being evicted. And so they always ask us to help on a pro bono basis. And so this might be a way to get involved and get access to legal work that's going to put you in front of a court, in front of a judge, right? And you may do it on a pro bono basis. You may not get paid for the experience, but it's a valid, you know, lawyering experience. You would have appeared in court, and eventually that is going to mean something. Or I don't know, really speaking on thinking on my feet here, but find a new startup and offer to do their general corporate work for them. I mean, they may not be in a position to hire a general counsel full-time or in-house counsel full-time. They may not be in a position to pay you right now, but it doesn't mean that if you're already registered as a lawyer, you cannot do some work for them in some fashion that's going to be meaningful for you. And eventually these may grow into a bigger company. It might be the next Facebook, right? So a society like ours, like the Washington Foreign Law Society, there are plenty of charitable organizations out there that are professional, right? Not necessarily charitable work, but professional organizations where you can join and see if you can join the board, if you can join in an officer position, get to know people. Get to know people and interact with people in any way that makes sense to you. I mean, for example, I've been involved for years with the Bulgarian school in the district. Right? There is it's a Sunday school, and they teach Bulgarian and Bulgarian literature and history. It's a few hours during the weekend, and I started by teaching Bulgarian there for second graders, and eventually joined their board and, you know, served on the board in various capacities, headed the organizations for 2 or 3 years. Now I'm their pro bono outside counsel. But, you know, that's a way to meaningfully get engaged into legal work. The fact that you're doing it for free doesn't mean that you cannot put it on your resume, right? Be creative. That's all I can tell you. If you decide to go back to school and do an LLM, or if you want to be a corporate lawyer, like an M&A lawyer, you may consider doing an MBA, negotiate with schools to do it online at a discounted fee. I mean, be creative. I don't know how much, negotiation power you have right now, because law schools and business schools and schools in general are trying to figure out what's going on right now and how they're going to reopen next year. But you have some leverage probably, and just be creative in how you can not leave a gap on your resume, stay involved, generate some income wherever way you can get it. Don't feel bad that I told you I served coffee for a few years. Don't feel bad about it, because you don't know what door will open for you from engaging in the experience. But ultimately, I was not in a position where I had to find a job in that environment, and so I would not pretend that I can tell you how to do it. You are the young generation that's coming, and you have to be creative and have faith that eventually this too shall pass.
Yeah. Thank you. Nevertheless, although you never found yourself in a situation like the 2020 graduates, you've served helpful advice, and I know that one or the other will be able to pick up from there and go with the flow and be creative, as you mentioned. I think we have time for one more question. Rizwanul Islam asks, could the pandemic mean more attorneys to do some of their work from home even when the pandemic is over?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is we've been doing it already. So for the last 10 years, I've been working remotely from Bulgaria for about a month and a half. Nobody knew that I was there because communications have improved so much that it's cheap, it's easy to connect. Sometimes, particularly in my field, when my clients are in Europe or in Asia, it's easier to be in Europe when you're on a call because it's in a more normal time zone, right? In a more kind of reasonable time zone when you're taking the call. For the immediate future, we are not planning on reopening because we're still kind of testing the situation. And I think that eventually more people will be, if not encouraged, will be tolerated if they choose to work remotely, at least a few days a week. And I think the stigma and the issue with like some older generation partners who think that unless you're there in the office from 7 to 7, you're not doing the work, right? I believe this is gone. And the good news is that people like me who are coming up the ranks do not have a problem with where you're sitting physically as long as you're working and you're producing on time and good quality product. That being said, I can tell you based on experience that eventually you do need real face time. It's valuable. I'm not sure that a Zoom meeting necessarily replicates the experience of a real face-to-face. And new ideas and new business and camaraderie really happen when you're talking. And it's kind of casual and not planned. And as I said, I've done this for 10 years from Bulgaria. My limit is about a month and a half. And then I am just itchy to go back to the office because I do need the interaction. And now we've been in this situation for 3.5 months, and I'm sick of it. So when it's safe, I would probably want to have an office, even if I'm not there every single day. But the stigma of working remotely, I think, is going to be gone. And I think you should expect that we will be doing this more.
Oh, that's very interesting to see your perspective on this, saying that you would prefer being in the office more rather than working remotely completely. Okay, with that, we're up on our time. Thank you so much, Antonia, for taking the time to join us today, for sharing your experience, for giving advice. It was an honor to speak to you, and there is nothing more to say. I'll give back to Juliana. Thank you.
Thank you so much to
Thank
all
you,
the
Aisha.
attendees. If you enjoy, please share with your friends. We will have the recording soon. And join us for new events. Give us ideas, what you want to see, what you want to learn about it. Be proactive with the society. Bye. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you for participating today. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.